revenge. For us. For us. For us.
The dining room felt too bright for what I was about to say. Too warm. Too familiar. Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Magnolia always looked perfect from the outside. Polished wood floors, soft jazz humming in the background, candles flickering like they were performing on cue. But that night, the air felt tight, like the walls knew something the people inside refused to acknowledge. Mom carved the turkey the way she always did, smiling at her own reflection in the knife more than at any of us. Vanessa, my sister, swirled her wine like she was prepping for a photo shoot. Dad sat at the head of the table, eyes on his plate, retreating into silence like it was home. Then Mom turned to me, all sugary sweetness masking something sharper. "So, Alyssa," she said, "your sister's wedding was beautiful, wasn't it? When's yours?" I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just set my fork down and said, gently, "I had mine." Silence. A slice of dead air cut through the room cleaner than the carving knife. Dad froze mid-bite. Mom's smile faltered. Vanessa's glass paused halfway to her lips. "You what?" Mom laughed, the kind of laugh that always meant denial was coming next. "Alyssa, don't joke like that." "I'm not joking," I said. "I got married 3 months ago. You were all invited." The room cracked open. Dad spoke first. "We never got any invitations." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I brought these." I reached into my bag and placed 3 envelopes on the table, the kind that suddenly make a room feel colder. Then I pulled out the stapled sheets behind them. Delivery confirmations, USPS tracking, signature receipts, all 3 signed for, all delivered, all time-stamped, all to this house. Vanessa's face drained first, then Mother's. Dad sat still, like the truth had just taken his breath hostage. I slid the top page toward them. 1 person signed for every envelope. My voice stayed calm, steady, unmoved. "Now," I said quietly, "I know who did." The ceiling fan hummed above us, slow and heavy, like it was waiting for the fallout. "You're watching true revenge, where every betrayal gets what it deserves." People assume betrayal starts with a single moment, a sharp break, a crack, a sudden shift. But mine didn't. It was quieter than that. It built itself slowly, drip by drip, over years of being the daughter who blended into the background. My name is Alyssa Cruz. I'm 29, and I work as a dental office receptionist in Seattle's Queen and District. My life is simple, modest paycheck, long commutes on the D-Line bus, and a small apartment that smells like lavender and fresh paper, because I journal almost every night. Writing is the only place I let myself speak freely. Growing up in Magnolia, surrounded by homes with manicured lawns and families who waved like everything was perfect, I learned early that in the Cruz household, attention was a scarce resource. Or rather, a resource reserved exclusively for my sister, Vanessa. She was the shining one, the daughter whose report cards were framed, whose dance recitals were broadcast to relatives, whose college applications triggered entire family celebrations. And me? I was the quiet one who didn't cause trouble, the daughter who understood, the daughter who stayed out of the way. Mom called me low maintenance, but what she meant was invisible. Dad loved us both, but his love was passive, soft. He stayed out of conflict, even when the conflict grew its claws. I used to think that if I worked harder, accomplished more, or just existed louder, maybe things would shift. But every attempt earned me either silence, comparison, or a reminder that Vanessa needed the support more. So I stopped trying. I built a life outside of them. My job, my journaling, my small but real friendships. That's where I met Marcus, the man I eventually married. He wasn't flashy or loud. He listened. He remembered things. He looked at me like I mattered, and not in the conditional way I grew up with, but in the steady, quiet way that makes a person rethink everything they once accepted as normal. When Marcus proposed, I didn't imagine a big wedding. I wanted something small, something warm, something that matched the life I built, not the one I'd been shut out of. Still, I sent invitations to my family, not out of obligation, but hope that maybe on my wedding day they would show up for me. Mom texted back a thumbs up emoji. Vanessa didn't reply. Dad called once, asked a few polite questions, and hung up quickly. When the wedding day came and they didn't appear, I tried to swallow it. Told myself it was a scheduling issue or a miscommunication. I smiled in the pictures. I held Marcus's hand. I convinced myself that peace was more important than the truth. But I journaled that night. I wonder why the hurt feels familiar. Back then, I didn't know. I didn't know the invitations had been delivered. I didn't know someone signed for them. I didn't know someone in my own family had chosen erasure over honesty. But looking back, the signs were there. Thanksgiving at my parents' house always smelled the same. Roasted rosemary turkey, Vanessa's overly sweet perfume, and the faint lemon cleaner Mom used whenever guests were expected, even if the only guests were us. I walked in carrying a store-bought pie because Mom insisted she had everything handled, which meant anything I brought would be minimized anyway. Marcus stayed home with the flu, so it was just me. A part of me was relieved. It's easier to pretend when you don't have someone beside you who sees through the performance. Everyone was already seated. Mom at the head of the table, Vanessa glowing as usual, and Dad carving turkey with the concentration of a surgeon. I slipped into my seat quietly, like I'd trained myself to do years ago. Dinner started the same way it always did. Mom listing Vanessa's accomplishments as if reading from a press release. Vanessa smiling softly, pretending to be modest. Dad nodding along. Then Mom turned to me. "So," she said brightly, "your sister's wedding was beautiful this spring. When's yours?" For a moment, I thought she was joking. Then I saw her face, expectant, innocent, utterly unaware of the bruise those words hit. I swallowed. Hard. "Mom," I said quietly, "I had my wedding 6 months ago. You got invitations." The silence that followed wasn't natural. It wasn't confusion or surprise. It was calculated, like everyone was waiting to see how the others would react. Dad blinked first. "We never got any invitations," he said, brows furrowing. The old version of me, the one desperate for harmony, would have apologized, questioned myself, tried to smooth it over. But not this time, because I'd come prepared. I reached into my bag, pulled out the small stack of printed delivery receipts I kept tucked between the pages of my journal. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't tremble. "These are from USPS," I said. All 3 invitations were delivered. All 3 were signed for. I slid them across the table. Mom froze. Dad stared down as if the papers might rearrange themselves into a different truth. But Vanessa was the only one who reacted. She inhaled sharply, eyes flicking just for a second toward Mom. And that was when something clicked inside me. A quiet shift, a cold accuracy settling into place. "Look at the signatures," I said. 3 signatures. All identical. All written in the same rushed swoop of handwriting. Vanessa's handwriting. She pushed her chair back. Too quickly. "Don't start with your dramatics. Alyssa, maybe the mailman messed up." "Funny," I said softly. "He messed up 3 times? And signed your name while doing it." Her lips parted. No sound came out. Mom finally stood up, voice thin. "Alyssa, sweetheart, you're misunderstanding something." I looked at her, really looked, at the controlled expression, the slight panic behind her eyes. The way she and Vanessa wouldn't look at each other. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I just sat there and let the truth speak in the silence they'd left wide open. They didn't forget my wedding. They didn't lose the invitations. They erased me. On purpose. Dad's fork clattered against his plate, breaking the quiet. "Alyssa," he murmured, "can we talk about this?" But he wasn't asking for truth. He was asking for the old version of me. The daughter who stayed quiet. The daughter who swallowed pain, so the family could keep pretending. That was the moment, I realize now, when something inside me stopped begging and started taking notes. The days after Thanksgiving were strangely quiet. No apology. No clarification. No attempt to explain why my family had sat there and lied to my face. Silence, their favorite weapon. But silence works both ways. I spent that weekend at my small apartment in Lower Queen, and the rain tapping against the windows while my laptop screen reflected a kind of clarity I hadn't let myself feel in years. My wedding invitations had tracking numbers. Tracking numbers had logs. Logs had details. So I dug. At first, it was simple verification: times, dates, addresses. But then I cross-checked the signatures using something I'd never thought I'd need: my high school yearbook. Vanessa had signed my senior page with the same dramatic curl in the V, the same looping letter shapes. And next to it, the same little downward swoop at the end of her name. It wasn't denial anymore. It was proof. Still, something felt off. Too easy. Too clean. Why would Vanessa go out of her way to hide my invitations? Why would Mom play along? Why would Dad pretend ignorance? What was the motive? So I did what I always did when my thoughts started spiraling. I wrote pages and pages in my journal. And that's when I noticed something I had written months ago. Mom asked if Marcus and I were still rushing into things. Vanessa said nothing but smirked. Dad asked if the venue had a limit on guests. He didn't sound happy about it. At the time, I brushed it off. Now, the pattern was staring back at me like a confession. They didn't want to come. They wanted me not to ask. But motives still felt thin, until I remembered the envelope. 2 weeks before my wedding, Vanessa came by my apartment to drop off a gift. She never gave gifts. Inside the gift bag was a card with a short note and a Starbucks gift card. I had forgotten about it entirely, except now I remembered something else. She asked to use my bathroom. For almost 15 minutes. My heartbeat slowed as the realization settled. The invitations were on the kitchen island that day. Vanessa wasn't dropping off a gift. She was scouting, and she didn't act alone. I opened my email and searched wedding RSVP. Buried inside my inbox was something I hadn't noticed. My mom had emailed the venue directly months ago, not to RSVP, but to ask whether guests had to be invited individually or as a household. Why? Why would she ask that? I forwarded everything: the receipts, the logs, the tracking stamps, the handwriting comparison, the email to Marcus, and typed, "I think they kept my invitations from Dad." Because that was it. The break in the pattern. Dad wasn't the mastermind. He was the one being controlled. The next morning, Marcus put me in touch with his friend, Leah Ramirez, a paralegal who'd seen more family sabotage cases than anyone her age should. She met me at a Starbucks near Pike Place Market, her laptop already open. She studied the documents quietly. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop. "Alyssa, this wasn't an accident. This was coordinated. Coordinated. Planned. Executed. Not by strangers. Not by enemies. By the people who raised me." Leah slid my own receipts back toward me. "You have enough to confront them," she said, "and the right to ask why." But I didn't want confrontation. Truth wasn't enough. I want balance. I whispered. My voice didn't shake. That was the moment clarity clicked inside me, like a lock turning. Once the shock hardened into clarity, the plan came together with unsettling ease. Not revenge, not confrontation, not the shouting match they probably expected if the truth ever surfaced. No, what I wanted was accountability, delivered quietly, cleanly, and in a way none of them could twist into Alyssa being dramatic again. Leah helped me structure everything. Step 1, document. Don't argue. She taught me how to compile a simple, courtroom-ready packet. Timestamps, delivery logs, signature matches, screenshots, the venue email, even a timeline of Vanessa's visit to my apartment. Facts, not feelings. Step 2, control the narrative. I wasn't going to them. They were coming to me. I drafted a calm, short message and sent it in a group text to my parents and Vanessa. I'd like to clear up something from Thanksgiving. I'll be at my place Sunday at 4 p.m. if you're open to talking. No accusations. No emotion. Just an invitation. Something they once denied me. Step 3. Set the stage. Leah suggested having a witness present. Someone neutral. I asked Marcus to be there, but in another room, listening, not speaking. Step 4. Stay silent. Let them talk first. Let the lies breathe and contradict each other. Let the truth expose itself through the cracks. And the final step, the one Leah emphasized. Don't show anger. Show certainty. People fear certainty more. I practiced in the mirror, steady breathing, steady voice, steady presence. No shaking. No shrinking. By Sunday afternoon, my small apartment felt different. Not like the place where I journaled my hurt, but like a place where things would finally shift. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for recognition. They arrived right on time, which already told me something. Guilt is punctual. Mom walked in first, wearing a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad followed, quieter than usual, hands shoved into his coat pockets. Vanessa came last, her expression perfectly flat, except for the tiny twitch in her jaw. I didn't offer food. I didn't offer small talk. I simply motioned for them to sit. Thank you for coming, I said. Mom clasped her hands dramatically. Of course, sweetheart. We've all been so worried about you. That scene at Thanksgiving. I placed the envelope on the table, the one containing everything. Before we talk, I said calmly, I want us to look at some facts. Mom froze. Dad frowned. Vanessa shifted slightly in her seat. I opened the folder and laid out the first page. USPS tracking logs for each invitation. Then the delivery timestamps. Then the 3 signatures. 3 identical swoops. 3 copies of the same handwriting. Vanessa's handwriting. Mom inhaled sharply. Vanessa's face drained, then flushed, then hardened again. Dad looked genuinely confused, and that hurt more than I expected. I know you didn't see my invitation, I said softly to him, because you never sign your name like this. She does. Vanessa shot up from her chair. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of. Sit. Mom hissed through her teeth. But I didn't look at either of them. I looked only at Dad. Your daughter hid your invitation, I said. She hid all of them. And Mom knew. Dad's eyes flicked to Mom. That single movement, that tiny shift, was the unraveling. What is she talking about, Victoria? He asked quietly. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I slid the email printout toward him. The one where she asked the venue if guests had to be individually invited, or as a household. Dad stared at it, for a long time. Too long. Finally, he looked up at Vanessa. Why would you? He whispered. Vanessa broke. She didn't need a big wedding, she snapped. She didn't deserve. She stopped herself, but it was too late. Silence thickened the room. A different silence this time. A revealing one. Mom placed a hand on Vanessa's arm, but Vanessa yanked it away. Dad stood. I can't look at either of you right now. He walked out. Just left. Mom went pale. Vanessa sat back down slowly, spine rigid, breathing sharp. I gathered the papers and slid them back into the envelope. You didn't just erase me, I said calmly. You erased him. You erased our relationship because you couldn't stand that something in this family wasn't about you. Vanessa's eyes were wet, furious, lost. Mom whispered, Alyssa, please don't do anything rash. I shook my head gently. I'm not doing anything. I'm just done. That was the revenge. Not shouting, not punishing, walking away with the truth laid bare and their own actions turning them against each other. They called it drama. I called it closure. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my family wasn't sharp or weaponized the way it used to be. It was hollow, an absence created not by punishment, but consequence. Dad moved into a small rental in Ballard. He texted me a few days after leaving the apartment. I didn't know. I should have asked more questions. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healing. But it was honest, something I had craved from him for most of my life. Mom sent a long, meandering message about misunderstandings and protecting family harmony, but she never addressed her choices directly. She tiptoed around accountability the way she tiptoed around anything that might smudge the image she curated for decades. Vanessa never reached out. Not once. And oddly, that was the easiest part to accept. Because once the truth surfaced, I realized something I'd been too loyal, too hopeful to see before. I had been living my whole life as the daughter they expected me to be, instead of the person I actually was. At work, patients continued to greet me with warm smiles. Marcus made us dinner, more nights than not. My journal filled with clearer pages, not questions or hurt, but recognition. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their apologies. I needed my voice, and I found it the moment I stopped begging to be seen. People think revenge is loud, a dramatic eruption. But mine wasn't. Revenge was letting the truth sit in the room with them. Revenge was refusing to shrink back into silence. Revenge was choosing distance over dysfunction. Walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Peace wasn't loud. It was earned. This was true revenge, where pain becomes purpose.